Have you ever walked away from a conversation and replayed it in your head like a movie you wish you could edit? You're in the shower thinking, "That's not what I meant," or lying in bed whispering arguments to the ceiling. Maybe someone said, "You're overreacting," or "You're too sensitive," and suddenly it felt like they weren't just disagreeing with you, they were misreading you. And that hits differently. Most people assume the fear of being misunderstood is just insecurity or ego, or that you care too much what others think. But psychologically, it goes much deeper than that. Because for some people, being misunderstood doesn't feel like a small social glitch. It feels like erasure, like their inner world, their thoughts, intentions, and emotions has been flattened into something unrecognizable. And if you've ever felt that sharp sting when someone gets you wrong, I want to show you why your brain reacts the way it does. Imagine your mind as a carefully curated museum. Every memory, every value, every scar is placed somewhere intentional. Now imagine someone walks in, glances around for 2 seconds, and confidently says, "Oh, this place is about arrogance," when in reality it's about survival, or kindness, or depth. Of course that hurts. Psychologists sometimes talk about something called the need for self-verification. Research by social psychologist William Swan suggests that human beings are deeply motivated not just to be liked, but to be seen accurately. We don't just want applause, we want recognition, accurate recognition. That's a big difference. If someone compliments you for being chill, but inside you're actually anxious and overthinking everything, it can feel strangely unsettling. Even praise can feel like misinterpretation. Because what you really crave is alignment between your internal reality and how others perceive you. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. The fear of being misunderstood often develops in people who have rich inner lives, deep thinkers, highly reflective personalities, sometimes people who grew up feeling unseen or unheard. When you spend a lot of time analyzing your own thoughts and emotions, you build a detailed map of yourself. You know why you react the way you do. You know your intentions. You know your layers. So when someone reduces you to a single trait, dramatic, cold, too intense, too quiet, it feels like they've ripped pages out of your story and pretended that's the whole book. And your brain does not like that. From a neurological perspective, social rejection and misinterpretation activate many of the same brain regions as physical pain. Studies using brain imaging have shown that areas like the anterior cingulate cortex light up when we feel socially excluded or invalidated. To your nervous system, being misunderstood can register as a threat, not because you're fragile, but because humans are wired for belonging. And belonging isn't just about being around people, it's about being known. Let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself over-explaining? Rephrasing your sentences 3 different ways, sending long texts to clarify a small comment? That's not random. That's your mind trying to close the gap between your internal intention and external interpretation. People who fear being misunderstood often become highly articulate, or at least they try to be. They rehearse conversations in advance. They imagine potential misinterpretations before they even happen. They become hyper-aware of tone, facial expressions, word choice. It can look like overthinking, but at its core, it's a desire for precision. And sometimes that precision comes from history. Maybe you grew up in an environment where your feelings were dismissed. Maybe you were labeled incorrectly, the difficult one, the shy one, the problem child, the overachiever. Labels can stick like wet cement. Once they harden, everything you do gets filtered through them. So now, as an adult, you're hypersensitive to being put in the wrong box. It's not vanity, it's self-protection. There's also something called the fundamental attribution error, a concept popularized by social psychologist Lee Ross. It describes our tendency to explain other people's behavior as personality-driven, while excusing our own behavior as situation-driven. If you snap at someone, you think, "I'm just stressed." If they snap at you, you think they're rude. This bias makes misunderstanding almost inevitable. Other people see fragments of you. They don't see the context, the backstory, the sleepless nights, the invisible battles.
So they create simple explanations. But you live inside the full documentary. So when someone reduces your complexity to a headline, it feels unfair, because it is, in a way. Now here's the twist. The more complex your self-concept is, the more painful misinterpretation can feel. If your identity is built around being thoughtful, ethical, or emotionally intelligent, then being seen as careless or selfish doesn't just feel inaccurate, it feels threatening. It clashes with your core narrative. Psychologists sometimes talk about something called cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable tension when external feedback doesn't match internal belief. Your brain wants consistency, so you either correct the misunderstanding or you feel anxious until you do. And sometimes this fear of being misunderstood shapes your entire behavior. You might avoid conflict, not because you're weak, but because you're afraid the conflict will distort how someone sees you. You might hold back opinions in group settings because you don't trust that people will understand the nuance. You might even shrink yourself to avoid being misread. That's heavy. But let's zoom out for a moment. Why does accurate understanding matter so much? Because being understood validates existence. It says, I see you, not just your surface, the real you. Think about the last time someone truly got you. Maybe they finished your sentence. Maybe they interpreted your silence correctly. Maybe they understood your humor without explanation. Didn't that feel relieving? That relief isn't small. It's nervous system regulation. It's safety. Attachment theory helps explain this too. When we feel securely attached, whether in childhood or adulthood, we develop an internal sense that others will respond to us accurately and compassionately. But if we've experienced inconsistent or invalidating responses, we may become hypervigilant about being misunderstood. We start scanning for signs that someone isn't getting us, a raised eyebrow, a delayed reply, a slightly off tone, and our mind goes, here we go again. But here's the part no one talks about enough. The fear of being misunderstood is often connected to empathy. You care deeply about understanding others, so you subconsciously expect the same effort back. When it's not there, it feels like imbalance, like you're translating everyone else's language fluently, but no one bothered to learn yours. That can create loneliness, even in crowded rooms. However, there's a quiet strength hidden in this fear. People who fear being misunderstood often have strong self-awareness. They've done the inner work. They know their motives. They care about integrity. They value clarity. These are not weaknesses. These are advanced psychological skills. The challenge isn't to eliminate the fear entirely. It's to soften its grip. Because here's a reality we rarely accept. Being fully understood by everyone is impossible. Each person sees you through the lens of their own experiences, biases, wounds, and expectations. You could explain yourself perfectly, and someone might still misinterpret you. Not because you failed, but because their lens is different. And that's not always your responsibility to fix. There's a quiet maturity that develops when you realize you don't need universal understanding. You need alignment with the right people. A smaller circle that sees you clearly is far more nourishing than a large audience that misreads you. And sometimes, the fear of being misunderstood teaches you something important. Not everyone deserves access to your full story. Depth requires discernment. You don't have to explain yourself to every passerby. You don't have to fight every mislabel. Sometimes the most powerful response is calm confidence, knowing who you are, even if someone else doesn't. That doesn't mean it won't sting. It might. You're human. But instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you can pause and ask, is this misunderstanding actually about me, or is it about their lens? That question alone can change everything, because the goal isn't perfect perception, it's inner alignment. When you trust your own narrative, when you know your intentions, your values, your character, the outside interpretations lose some of their power. Not all, but enough. And maybe that's the deeper psychological shift here. Instead of desperately trying to control how you're perceived, you focus on living in a way that feels authentic, clear, honest. and you let understanding become a byproduct, not an obsession. You'll still clarify when it matters. You'll still communicate with care, but you won't exhaust yourself trying to manage every possible misinterpretation. You'll allow some people to misunderstand you and survive it, and that's freeing. So if you've ever felt that knot in your stomach when someone gets you wrong, I hope you see it differently now. It's not weakness, it's your brain's way of protecting your identity and your need for belonging. But you are more than any single interpretation. And somewhere out there, there are people who will understand you without you having to translate every sentence. Until then, keep refining your voice, keep knowing yourself, and maybe ask yourself this tonight. Do you want to be understood by everyone or truly understood by the right ones?